Playing the game for a lot of entrepreneurs brought cybersecurity more to the forefront, how important that is. And some people were saying, well, clearly that's not realistic, that there's a cyber attack at the end of each round. No, it's not, because it happens more often. It does not happen, end of the day, just once.
Welcome to the Research for Good podcast. My name's Professor David Ellis, and today I'm joined by Dr. Joanna Syrda and Dr. Kseniya Stsiampkouskaya. Today we're going to be talking about a board game that you developed that aims to help businesses become more secure in the digital age. So some people listening might be surprised, at the very least, to discover that as part of your research you've developed a board game. Mm-hmm. Could you tell me a bit about the sort of background?
So this is part of the Describe Hub Plus project that University of Bath was doing with University of Bristol, Royal Holloway. So basically this is funded by the UKRI Digital Security by Design.
The aim of Describe was to understand the sort of decision-making and likelihood of adoption of a new technology that is unfamiliar to the market and the wider society. So the game was designed to understand how people make these decisions, what comes at play, what factors influence that, so trying to simulate that more complex environment and understand how people behave, what they do, and how they make these decisions.
So it has so many interesting economic properties. So for me as an economist, it's a very interesting field. But the data is not out there, not on a micro level. So then what do social scientists do when they don't have data? They design experiments, and we didn't want to have a simple, static, one-time, one-shot experiment. We wanted to account for that kind of a temporal nature of decision-making in an organization. So let's say that you're starting up, you don't have any negative legacy. Do you want to invest a lot in cybersecurity, or do you want to quickly acquire customers, grow your business? So all of these decisions, and then the learning that is possible, we wanted to simulate and emulate that. And hence, I remember long time ago in one meeting with Adam Johnson, with Kseniya over here, we were talking about that, and then we said, okay, let's design a game. And it's really interesting how our decisions in life and in academia are so path dependent, because then we really designed the game. And that's around the time that Kseniya joined us as research associate, and she took the lead on the development of the game, which was very much academic research based, so a lot of reviews and such.
So again, people listening will be like, right, a board game. How do you even start when it comes to designing a board game?
So the way we started, and I was thinking about how do you create this environment for decision making? So then, as an economist, I started with firms' profit function and other objective functions and constraints, and then I started solving it. And then, turns out it's too simplistic, really. You don't want a game that has an obvious dominant strategy for the player. So when we talk about game development, we talk about the Goldilocks zone or Goldilocks difficulty. It cannot be too difficult, it cannot be too easy. But we also wanted to simulate this kind of cognitive overload that is happening. So imagine you're starting up. You have a product and you don't have anything else. You don't have funds, you need to get investors, you need to decide how to grow your business, you need to keep an eye on cybersecurity, but also on your customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. And if it sounds like a lot, that's on purpose. So we started with pen and paper, but then we decided to expand this. The existing games around cybersecurity are quite often shopping games, very useful games, but you have a limited budget and you decide how to spend it. And here you're running a company that the budget can change depending on your business decisions, and there are fluctuations, and you decide how to spend it across a set of competing interests.
So it's quite interesting because it describes about hardware, and a board game is a piece of hardware.
It is.
Was that deliberate? Often we design, software or studies, data that's not kind of physical, but it's quite cool that the board game it's in a box and people can buy the board game.
very often when you talk about cybersecurity, you don't have anything physical. So the board game, this physical artifact, really puts it in place so you can touch it, you can interact with it, you can see it, and we actually have some interesting insights based on how people, for instance, play with the physical board. And then, of course, we have the wonderful online version where Joanna took the lead on the online version. And again, the insights are wonderful, and the reach of the online game is so much wider than the physical game, but you get different levels of immersion when you make people play it. So it's interesting.
So, Kseniya, is there a way of winning the game or losing the game, or is it one of those kind of like open box things that, like Monopoly, you go bankrupt, or?
So we have the winning conditions, and there are definitely better strategies, and there are more sure ways to lose, but overall, there's no one definitive way to win. Again, we had a look at the early data from the online game, which Joanna can tell a little bit more about, but it was interesting how you identify 4 different strategies and how some were less successful overall and others were quite interesting. Some people engage in more agile decision making, some people kind of engage in more protective, kind of defensive.
So I suppose that adds like a replay value to the game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can definitely replay it. It's not, it's based on the scenario of this startup, but it's not really kind of a scenario driven game. So you can replay it as many times as you want, and we have a competitive and cooperative version. So yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about the different strategies that are possible within the game?
So many strategies, I suppose, are possible, but based on gameplay data, and we've tested it with our wonderful MBA and MSc students, the online game that has this nice, precise data collection. It's always good to see that an environment is generating sensible data. There is one set of strategies where it's very solid, safe, very good on cybersecurity, then these teams typically do very well and win. There is one set of strategies, or like a group, a cluster, the opposite of that. No kind of learning over time. In the end, they end up spending a lot on patching and cybersecurity and things. Also a lot as a share of their budget because their budget is low because they've been hit by fines. And these teams typically do go bankrupt. Then there is one, it's almost like falls down. It starts really strong, but it seems that at some point they lose most of their defenses, and there are those pinch points in the game where as you grow your customers, you have to upgrade your cyber defenses, and you might not be able to afford that. So that's a team that starts really strong, and then they kind of don't do very well because they don't take care of everything the way they should be, or grow too fast, because you also don't have to progress to the next stage if you're not ready. And they typically do not so well. And then there's a cluster that intrigues me that I would really like to have more data, because this is just preliminary. A very agile mixed bag. It seems that they react to the things that are happening in the previous round. They change their strategies. Sometimes they go stronger in cybersecurity, sometimes more on marketing efforts. It's very hard to fit a strategy to what they're doing apart from just reacting, but they do incredibly well at the end with finish quickly with high budgets at the end. So it seems that that kind of agility also in thinking is something that is that nicely resonates in the game.
Could it be that fourth cluster are just really lucky?
You know what? And that's why I need more data. And that's why we need everybody to play and show me what are the possible strategies.
So you piloted like ideas online first?
No, we actually started with the physical board game first, and wonderful cycles of development. If I can just go back to the winning strategies. So not a single dominant strategy, but I would say that there are definitely dominated strategies. So while there is not one way to win, there are some very well tested ways to lose the game, which, in a sense is quite pedagogical. And I think we have been doing a demonstration of the game at a conference, and I think we were pedagogically showing what not to do, because the moment we decided that we cannot afford a certain defense, like DDoS protection, we would get a DDoS attack, and it was for everybody to see, although it was very random. So I thought that it's interesting how the game has a lot of kind of real life ways that it can have very negative consequences based on your plays.
I guess there's like the data that the game creates, but then there's also the interesting part about following up to see what some of those impacts might be. So, you know, if it's in training, or even if it's just an individual playing it who's just interested, it would be really interesting to know if that changes their thoughts about their own security.
Yeah, and thinking about the impact and the ways you can measure impact, I suppose, of the game. So the game can be designed or used in a very purely pedagogical way when we think about intended learning outcomes. And the competitive game has on each card, so we should have set their elements of chance. One big element, a random element, is what type of a cyber attack you're going to get at the end of each round. But what is not random is what defenses you have purchased and if you are mitigated, protected or not. But then you can learn about the distribution of cyber attacks and what helps, what works, and then you know how to balance business needs and cybersecurity needs. But we also had conversations about it there being a change of heart. So how, you know, playing the game for a lot of entrepreneurs brought cybersecurity more to the forefront, how important that is. And some people were saying, well, clearly that's not realistic, that there's a cyber attack at the end of each round. No, it's not, because it happens more often. It does not happen, you know, end of the day, just once.
Which is particularly topical given current cyber attacks, that there's a lot more going on that people don't always see, but when you think about major supermarkets at the moment, that's in the news. So, you know, it does happen and it does affect people.
And the things we detect, because I think the really good cyber attacks are the ones that don't go detected, right?
Exactly. And when people ask that about kind of having a cyber attack at the end of pretty much every round, I usually say that look at your spam folder. Half of those are phishing and even maybe spear phishing. So, and all of those are cyber attacks. So there are multiple cyber attacks even going on right now aimed at all of us faculty members. It's just that a lot of them are picked up, you know, by Microsoft, by antiviruses, by security training that we had.
Future-wise, is the idea that this game could be used within industry as well as just people who want to play a game?
So absolutely, we have interest from industry. So far, it's mostly around using it as part of the training, and not just industry. I was just in Manchester at Cyber UK, and there's interest from the police. For the protect function, and they have been looking at a lot of different games and other interesting tools to incorporate in their training. With companies, it's usually large organizations that have their own internal cybersecurity unit, and then they need to provide the training, but also get buy-in from people in different divisions. So the more immersive and stimulating you make the training, the better. So from industry, mostly around that. It's also a fantastic conversation starter, and I think it helps people understand not only their own decision making, but also the decision making of others. So when we ran it with our MBA's division, it was interesting to see how people were talking about their own risk aversion and what they're comfortable or not comfortable doing. So you can really get to know your team and your colleagues as well. So there's the pedagogical, there's the engagement, there's the learning about oneself, about others. There is also the data collection for us. So the value of the game for me flows both directions. We provide an environment, a tool, but when somebody plays it online, we get the data on the different steps. And the way we created the online version, we get to observe at each round every decision a player makes, so you can think about almost like a longitudinal setting that you can do a lot of longitudinal things with.
So I guess people who are listening might have initially thought, well, why are you designing a board game about this? But there is a real serious reason. You know, a board game can be fun to engage people, but it's not to diminish the seriousness of the kind of the theme, but it's a way of making it more real to people.
Absolutely.
I suppose an obvious question in one way is, so you've designed this game. Do you have any advice for people who might be thinking about designing games, who are thinking they might do it for their own research? You know, is there any tips?
I would say think twice, but I'm joking, of course. It was a really enjoyable experience. It was a really fun way to bring all our kind of academic expertise to connect with other experts and, you know, just basically spend time playing, figuring out the game, the rules. But yeah, from kind of after we have developed the game, we spoke to some people and found out that there are different materials that can help you with that. And
repositories of mechanisms, tried and tested. In a sense, each game is a compilation of a finite set of things. And we, in our a little bit of arrogance, may I say, just kind of, we all like playing games, right? But we kind of created it together, not because it was easy, because we thought it was going to be easy.
Yes. So the whole process took about 9 months, out of which 6 months were just pure play testing, so tweaking the rules, changing the things, figuring out what's working, what's not working. And before that, it was a good month or two of just, kind of rapid reviews of existing games, of different areas of literature, some of which we weren't quite so familiar beforehand. So because of course it's a serious game, so of course you want to make it fun for people, but also you want to make sure that any assumptions you're making in the game are robust, like using classic theories like diffusion of innovation and so on. So making sure that you can move on with publication and people can actually use it for teaching and research. So I suppose that was one of the biggest challenges in terms of making not just a game, but actually a serious game that people can use for academic research and other practical applications.
You've been listening to the Research for Good podcast. To find out more about research in the School of Management, you can visit our website or click the links in the episode description.